Yeah, we're live. It is 2:23 in the afternoon on I think today's Saturday, right? Friday. So not Saturday. I'm jumping ahead a couple of days. Exciting times today. This is how small the world is. So I'm talking to some guys that I hope to do some stuff with out at Bonneville with the Metro. We've talked about the Sprint Turbo slash Metro 3-cylinder 1 liter stuff. And I'm hoping to do a bunch of testing with the 2 motors that I have and run them on the engine dyno and run them on the chassis dyno, run the AMR 500. We've talked about all that stuff and going to Bonneville. And it turns out that these same guys are responsible for the V12 LS motor. So this is a, it's just weird how all this stuff works out, and it's awesome. So the poll for today, let's see how people, see if they behave. Okay, I'm gonna have to capitalize that because, out of respect. Okay, who wants to see the V12 run on the engine dyno to see what it does, what it sounds like, all of that stuff? And the cool thing is we get to try to run that with some V12 red hot cams from Brian Tooley Racing. And so we're going to talk about that. What people probably don't know, that Brian Tooley Racing specializes in V12 LS cams. They actually don't. And we're going to talk about that actually. So let's take a look at that. That will be our poll. Let me know what you guys think. I'm hoping right off the bat it should jump into the 100% range because, yeah, see, there we go. I like the 100%, and there's got to be somebody that I know that ruins it, but you can't ruin it because it doesn't need to be tested. But the question is, okay, let's talk about the Brian Tooley arrangement here. So how do you make V12 cams? Well, the one way to do it would be to do a billet, to do a billet core or billet blank, and then grind your own cam doing that. But that's not the way that it has been done for this motor in the past. I saw this motor at SEMA long ago, and it was there and it runs and it worked and all of that stuff. It sounded cool, and it was a V12 LS. So it was definitely unique. Since then, I think he's done a few of these, which are cool. And naturally, it takes a lot of work. It involves, cutting and welding blocks and putting them back together. It involves custom crankshafts, obviously. It involves custom, everything's custom. A custom cylinder head, so you got to, cut and paste the cylinder heads together. This particular one that we want to test is a rec port headed, so LS3 based headed, so are already a ton of airflow potential. If we like we've talked about before, if we have a given motor and we start adding cylinders to it, we just start adding power to it because now the amount of power that you can make relative to the airflow has just increases because you've just added cylinders. So it's a really kind of a good deal. But the question is, how do you make, how did this thing run with camshafts before? Well, when it was running before, at least this is how I understand the story, that what they did was they welded up cams. So they welded cams end to end, not quite end to end, because when you think about the firing order of a V12 versus a V8, it's going to be different. So what you have to do is you have to section the camshaft and then weld it back together, which I thought, dude, that is genius. So apparently when this thing was running before, it was running, I think, on factory LS6 cams, probably the things that they had at the time. And he painstakingly welded all of these back together so that they were all lined up and the camshaft worked. And so my hat's off to the amount of and the quality of fabrication and machining and stuff that went into this. It's just amazing. And then I have lots of other pictures and then another surprise on this as well coming up. which we probably won't talk about today. We'll probably talk about that in another deal. But the 12-cylinder thing is very cool. So if you look at the thumbnail and you count the number of ports, you're like, oh yeah, that's 6 on that side. That's not 4. That's more than that. In fact, it's 50% more. So somebody was asking about the displacement. So it's 1.5 times. I think that I can't swear to this. I think that these were LS1 blocks. So it would be 1.5 times 5.7. So 8.5 liters. It's a good size. Should I run it on the dyno? So that's the question. But then how does the BTR thing come through? And that's what we want to talk about today. They needed camshafts for this, obviously, and I think that they're still running. And again, I'm gonna have to make sure that I got this all correct, but I think that they're still running the factory rod and piston assemblies in these. So we have still, with that head and that rod and piston assembly, especially the piston, we have a given amount of piston to valve clearance, just like we do on a V8. So then the question becomes, how much camshaft can I run? Well, we can run the kind of camshafts that we can run in a V8. And so I suggested, well, let's run the Brian Tooley Racing Red Hot cams in there. We know that those work well. They're not gigantic, so that the thing will still, you can still kind of drive around. Although in a 12-cylinder, that's probably not going to be a problem. But we can always go up in camshaft, or they can always go up in camshaft at a later date and see how well that's going to work out. They have their own custom intakes that they've done. The picture that you see, I think, is a glued together long runner LS1 or LS6 manifold. They have others that they've done. Obviously, it would be fairly easy to do. We have the stackability of something like a fabricated sniper style manifold, where you just add, cut one off, add 4 more runners. Since all of these are symmetrical, that's a fairly easy deal. And again, with the level of fabrication and welding that these guys are capable of, that's a really, really simple thing. If they're welding heads together and welding blocks together and making their own cranks and making their own camshafts, essentially, they have the ability to do all of this. And like I said, the one that they have now, I'm kind of curious. Now I need to find out, now that I say that out loud, they have rec port heads. So I don't think that these can be 5.7 blocks welded together. They have to be LS2 or LS3 blocks. So I'm gonna have to find that out. We'll take a look at that and see. But I'm excited about it. Obviously, having never run, I've only stood near this one. I think when it was at SEMA, but I'm curious to see. We want to see it. It's cool. That's on the dyno, and then naturally, if we run it NA, we would want to do some upgrades. But if it's the right block and right bore size for those LS3 heads, then it should be capable of making a lot of power. I mean, it has a ton of head flow. So the amount of power that you can make per cylinder is a lot. And then with more cylinders, we're at 1.5 times, the amount of power that you could make from a V8. So, which puts it at, fairly high. I mean, even a mild build, 3 times 1.5. Yeah, even on an NA deal, if you had your typical 550 horse, which would be a cammed LS3, if you have that and you multiply that out times 1.5, you've got an 800 horsepower plus NA motor. So that's a lot. And then obviously more if yeah, so it's quite a bit. 600 times 1.5 is 900. Yeah, so you can start out with some fairly big NA power numbers, and then obviously getting to even greater boosted power numbers if you wanted to do that, nitrous or whatever you want to do is kind of cool. I just think it's interesting to start off with so much NA power. And the guys from Brian Tooley Racing, it's awesome of Brian to jump in and say, yeah, he's sending out some camshafts which they can section and put back together and make a V12, a BTR V12 red hot cam combination, which is very, very cool. So that will be interesting to see. I'm excited about that. I don't know how far out that is. I'll have to find out on a timeline for that. But the nice thing is that it hooks up the way that it hooks up, and just like an LS, you know, the bell housing all the same, flywheel's the same, all that stuff's the same. I need to find out if we can, from Eric, if we can run a V12 with the Holley setup. We'll have to see. The MS3 Pro, I'm certain that we could, just need a harness, but you know, nothing there that's insurmountable. I think that they have made their own headers for this. And so it would be cool to maybe try a couple of different ones, maybe tri-wise, which would, you know, because these are essentially 2 6-cylinders, at least as far as the head is concerned, you know, tri-wise on both sides versus a 6-into-1 or something. You know, there's lots of exhaust potential there, which is kind of awesome. Not a lot of V12 intake manifolds and not a lot of, right now, V12 camshafts, but it would be interesting to compare if they still have the LS6 style camshaft that they ran in here, compare that to the Brian Tooley camshaft, which would, you know, we know the Red Hot cam is going to be better than an LS6 camshaft. So even on V12, so it'd be interesting to see. Let's see what you guys got going on. Am I the only one? No, you're not. There's lots of people here. Yes, it's a V12 LS because they've added 4 more cylinders to that. Yes, there's 2 more. 2 times equal length 6-into-1 headers should also be included. So you want 6-into-1s or tri-wise? Just unbox my BTR centrifugal stage 1 camshaft. Extend the V8 camshaft. Yeah, should you run LSV12 on the dyno? Let me see. Exactly. Great engines for fast kit planes, especially if you've got turbos. Yeah, turbos on that thing would be cool. And then because it's a 6-cylinder, you could do quad turbos, right? Because you do 3 blowing into each one of the turbos. In the garage, putting my LS back together for the 57 Dodge wagon, getting it ready for boost. First time hearing about this. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's been around. It was at SEMA a long time ago. I mean, it was, I don't know, it was 6 or 8 years ago or something. Need to call those guys that can make a head for the 4300. I actually want to talk to them about that. There's now an LSV12 in aluminum from Australia with forged cranks already ready for your car. Cool. Any updates on the 8-into-1 test? Are you talking about the header? I've not heard of such an animal tied to a dyno. Yeah, I haven't seen any dyno results on this. Yep, V12. Oliver, why did you vote no? 5 million pounds of boost. You can see the internet responses to a V12 LS already. You did 2 LSs and not 2 JZs, 4 JZs, and connect them in some sort of common block. Bandsaw epoxy will get a V12 intake manifold. Yeah, making the LS6 intake manifold like they did, that shouldn't be too much of a problem. And I think that they have, if you look closely on it, it looks like they have connectors that hold the manifold together. Did you see where the Russian hot rodders took a 4-cylinder 1324 or 1342, cut the crank and cam, and made a 1234 firing order? No, how well did it run? How that is cool. They do some really cool stuff. That's Garage 54, right? Can you put the M90 on it? Yeah, I think the M90 might be a little soft on an 800 horsepower NA motor. Like a BMW V12. They did make a lot of those. Does anyone need 62 Dodge full-size wagon rear quarter windows? 2 M90s. A 1234 firing order worked. It didn't have vibration problems. it's just, it's so high on the cool scale. And then with the Brian Tooley cams in it, it would be the V12 cams. That's cool. The nice thing about the V12, as long as we can get the Holly or one of the management systems to work, the dynoing of it should be pretty quick. How much displacement is a V12? Well, it's going to be 1.5 times whatever block and crank they use. I don't know now that I saw that they had rec port heads on it. So I'm thinking that it's got to at least be 6 liters. Sean, you're thinking wrong, though. You shouldn't be thinking a pair of turbos. You should be thinking 4 of them with 3 cylinders feeding each turbo. So 3 cylinders, each feeding maybe a 3076, or maybe even something smaller than that. Pulling at 97%. Yeah, we're down to 94. It's always going to be some, Jay, what's going on? Thank you very much. Compounds on it. Yeah. I'm curious about the strength of stuff when you make it a V12. I don't think that they don't want to hurt the motor, I'm sure, but it'd be cool if it made 800 horsepower NA. That would be nice. All the turbos, all the time. Turbo, 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 nothing but turbo. I'm wondering how it will sound. He said that it sounds an awful lot like it sounds like an LSV8, which I thought was interesting. I might be imagining if it didn't Cadillac do a V16 with a concept car a while back that was essentially 2 LS2s mated together with 4 V8 heads and 2 V8 intake manifolds. They might have. Somebody that these guys know did a V16, but coupled them differently, didn't weld the blocks together. Dodge Wagon was a 2-door, 3-speed 318, and we had all the matching number 413 and 4-speed, but somebody stole the wagon. That's not good. You vote no to obvious questions, so maybe you shouldn't be around. Really sure there's a video of the Aussie made V12 LS running on an engine stand on YouTube. This one was running in the car. I think I might have a picture of it in the vehicle. The sound, I wonder about the header design. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously that would make a difference. And then if you be interesting to see what happened if you put an X pipe exhaust on it and stuff. That would be cool. A V12 with an X pipe. Why is it they couldn't make the horsepower they make now from a small block Chevy back in the 60s? Well, they didn't have cylinder heads that flow anywhere near what heads do now. The small block heads of the muscle car era were 200 CFM heads, and LS motors now are, well, the LS3 was like 315. So a 50% change in airflow. The intake manifolds are way better. They have windage trays on them. I mean, the whole motor is better. Should I keep my truck motor stock or cam it for your wife? You probably put if you're going to put a cam in it, put a mild cam in it. Put like a torque cam or something in it. We weld the two O's, 215s together with a billet crank. That's cool. Cummins has a V16 diesel industrial engine. So you're talking, Dave, you're talking about a small block Chevy from back in the 60s. Again, they didn't have cylinder heads. Even if you're talking about not comparing it to an LS, or you're comparing it to a modern small block Chevy, technology and talent and availability of different products has changed dramatically since the 60s, since the 50s and 60s. They didn't even have aluminum heads back then. So the ability to make power, like if you look at a small block Chevy, a really good example would be an older, well, even I guess a newer one. I don't know what the displacement is anymore, but a cup motor, but even drag race motors or the sprint car motors on alcohol with stack injection stuff on them. Those are easily 950 horsepower motors. Yeah, it'd be cool to. I'm excited about that. And I sent off an email to the guys at Comp Cams. I talked to them at MPMC about the V10 Ford also. So I sent them a request for cams for a 2-valve 6.8 V10. You can weld it up 283 heads. Yeah, 283 head was not good. But even the 461s and the 186s and that kind of stuff, they made them good. They made them better than they were, but they were not anywhere near what. I mean, you have a small block Chevy heads now, altered valve angle small block Chevy heads that are flow 450 CFM. So it's a lot. The who's the Pro Action or somebody like, no, what the heck is the name of the racing heads that the small block guys were using and off road and stuff? Any idea how much porting I can on your Gen 6 big block Chevy heads? I don't know that I've ever seen a set of like fully ported Gen 6 big block Chevy heads. I don't know how much is there. And I don't know how much is available. Are you trying to make a lot of power with it? Most people just put on inexpensive aluminum heads. Bob, do you have a flow bench? Are you measuring this stuff as you go? You want to make 650 horsepower? So 300 and something. I would think that port would support that. We had the first 327 heads in the fall of 62. Yeah, that head, like a 461 head, would be way better than a power pack head. I mean, the valves would be bigger, the ports would be, everything would be better about it, right? Than a fuel injection head. Fuelie head didn't, or the original Fuelie head in like a 57 in a 283 didn't really have to support very much power. It had a small bore. It didn't have a lot of motor, unless guys were making those into 301s back in the day. Hello, Bruno. The V12 is not a Ryan Falconer thing. This is two LS motors put together. No flow bench. I hook up a shop vac and paddle wheel flow meter and get them close. Like done on a small block Chevy set so far. As long as you have some way to register a difference, that's all you're looking for. Hey, look, it was this and now it's more than this. That's good. It was this and now it's less than this. Probably not as good. I'm going to be flow testing my taking them out of. They've been sitting for decades now. The Sprint turbo head that I think my buddy Tom did these back in the day, and I'm gonna I'll flow them again. We did flow them, but I lost all of my Sprint data, unfortunately, when my hard drive crashed. So I'll reflow those and find out how much better they are than stock heads, and see what we can do with them. Might try a bigger, better valve. We'll see. Let's just put on inexpensive aluminum heads. Yeah, just so that you don't have to deal with iron, so you don't have to port iron heads. I mean, not everybody that I've talked to that ports heads are like, I don't even want to do iron heads anymore. The Omni is going to be coming back. You have a V12 LS. I don't have it, but I have met the people that do have it, and I think that they're going to let me run it on the dyno, which will be cool. So running a Vortex supercharger. I thought that would have been interesting. Which Vortex supercharger? Hello. In fact, I'm doing a story right now for the guys from Summit on Vortex stuff. Hello. What are you doing, huh? What are you doing, huh? You want to come up and see? Come on up. Jump up. Come on. Come up, Bruno. Come up and say hi. There we go. Hello. Yeah, puppies and pizza. Oh, there's Brady. Okay, you want your turn now? Come on. Okay, you want to say hello? I know everybody got to come up and see Daddy. Okay. I know. Good boy. Oh, good boy. Oh. What? You want to get my arm? Do you want to chew on my arm? All right. Hello. Okay. Let's see. 3.8 liter supercharger. Yeah, I have a couple of those. I'm going to be running that pretty soon because I have a ported one. So we're going to run the ported one on the 5.3 again and see if we can go up from our last number, which was over 600. You can bore the 283 to 4-inch, but boring the 327 to 4 1/8, well, we had to sleeve them in the gas station with the quick way. Them on the 283. Okay. 4 1/8 seems like a lot of bore for a stock 327. Oh, but you had to sleeve it. Okay, that makes sense. Make sure you get good audio of the engine running. Yep. Crossflow head for 300. Yeah, I kind of want to do that with these guys. I want to do a 300, an LS headed 300 that actually goes on the dyno and makes power and stuff. Just like doing different stuff. Yeah, I get you, and I'm all for that. How much power will a stock turbo SN95 302 block hold with good tune and timing? I don't know. We've done 700 plus with a stock block. Did a DOD on my 5.3. The guy who helped me drop something while putting the heads on. I suspect he wasn't watching what he was doing and dropped it. What did he drop something in the motor? That's not good. He dropped it in the cylinder. What did he drop? Did he drop a nut or a bolt or something? Yeah, that's not good. That will destroy everything. Yeah, it couldn't be a head bolt, and because that'd be just way too big. But a nut is usually the offending thing. You think you could use one head from a V12 LS? No, the bore spacing is not exact on the 300 versus an LS. That's why they cut the head. And actually, to do it right on the 300, you have to cut 3 heads because you have to section it. It really should be done in 3 sections so that you can get the bore spacing close. Because if you just put the heads on there, you see that the head is shifted over relative to the bore opening. Oh, when you put the manifold on, yeah, it's okay if you drop things sometimes into the port as long as the valve's closed. But usually, when you drop something, what I've found is when you drop something, you drop it into the one that has an open valve, and then it goes in and causes problems. Sent an air cleaner nut through my old Iron Duke. They were tough, but not that tough. I did that on my 260Z motor. I had made a custom air intake setup to bolt on to the top of my side draft Webers, and then I had a cold air going to it to an opening that was on the side of the radiator, and I chromed it and it looked all fancy. Super Richie, do it yourself. You know how we do it, but it was held on by the bolts or nuts that hold on the stacks because the stacks were inside. So it has little washers, half moon washers and then a lock washer, and then a nut that hold the stacks into the carburetor housings, and that's what held this on too. Problem is, one of those came loose. Again, I'm certain my fault for not tightening it. It came loose and got sucked in while I was doing a elevated speed test, and bounced around in there. When I took the head off, because I had to take the head off, it bent a valve, which we fixed. But when I took it off, it just just hammered the piston in the combustion chamber. So I just got everything out and smoothed them both out with a little whizzy wheel and put it back together like that. I have an 03 2500 6-liter gas. My dad gave me. I want to make it fast. What's the first thing I should upgrade? I'm on a budget. Camshaft is the biggest thing that you can do. Camshaft and springs is the biggest thing that you can do for power. Have you ever seen 300 Boss heads? My father, there's only like 50 of them. I don't know what that is. Are you talking about a Boss? Is it a Boss head for the 300 6-cylinder? Or what is it? What is it for? Are they Boss heads for a Boss 302 or Boss 351? The worst I had was rust flakes falling in the cylinder bore when I was changing plugs on my Dakota. I don't even really care about that stuff. That stuff usually just goes back out. Found the lock washer, but the nylock was missing in action. Yeah, it does. It does a variety of damage, and then it'll transfer. It'll go back out the intake, and because you'll get reversion, and it'll blow back out the intake and then sucked into another one. It's really bad. Can you use any type of thread sealer on head bolts, or do you have to use You don't have to use Permatex brand. Other people make that. All right, Julius. Is a Boss head for the 300 6-cylinder. I've seen people weld up Cleveland heads, like Boss 302, 351, heads for 300 6-cylinders. I've seen that done because that's essentially very similar bore spacing to the LS. So I've seen them do that, but I didn't know that anybody ever made dedicated 6-cylinder heads for that called the Boss. I'm not familiar with that. What's the best cam to use for 4.8 that will have boost? It doesn't matter. The boost is irrelevant. You should pick the cam for what you want the 4.8 to do when it's naturally aspirated. So pick the camshaft that you want for use with a stock converter, for drivability, for mileage, for idle quality, for power, where you want the thing to make power. The turbo or blower doesn't matter. You just pick the cam for what you want it to do, and then you add boost to it, and it just multiplies whatever's there. These guys are now making castings. They could easily shift bore spacing. The guys doing it on the cheap are fudging the spacing using 5.3 heads with more space to cover the larger bores. I don't know what that is. I don't know who is making castings with altered bore spacings. Do you think spool time is different between a 475 and a 480? To switch, I want faster spool, manual car, and I'm toying with the idea. I think we'll bolt right into the hot side. Are these both T6s on the S475 and the S480? And are they both the same AR? Or are you changing the AR also? Hot Rod, is that a question? I don't know what your references to. I remember seeing a few guys building Boss headed 306s, but never from the factory. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. The Cleveland headed stuff I've seen. I've never seen any of them run on the dyno. Did you see all the 4-cylinder truck motors in the new Colorados? They're braking now? I didn't see that. My Gen 5 454 seems fine after changing the intake and watching lake sand fall inside. I mean, I cleaned it out the best I could. Given some of the stuff that we've run for LS motors by scuffing up the bores and vacuuming stuff out, and pouring BBs into it and watching all those come out, it's amazing what will pass through there. Boost doesn't multiply. What I got my cam for was a chop. It still does a chop, but it shouldn't add any chop to that though. I've seen LS heads welded up for the 300 as well. An LT on that would be like a pushrod 2JZ. And why do you think an LT head would be better than an LS head on the 6-cylinder? Steve Morris is doing castings. He's doing castings. He's changing the bore spacing on the castings because is he doing different blocks or something? Hold the phone. If you make your engine 12-to-1 and add boost, you need special gas. Yes, you don't want to have, normally when you're adding boost, you don't run 12-to-1 static compression. It's not necessary. The old Cleveland head 300s were said to make 600 horsepower, and they said it was a full second faster than the conventional heads the year prior. No factory 300 ever made anywhere near 600 horsepower that I know of. I've never even heard of that. 600 horsepower would be 2 horsepower per cubic inch. That will be a lot even for a race motor. Would an S500 turbo support a 632? No. You could do multiples though. No, an S500 is for, yeah, that's probably I'm sure that's got to be a 1500 horsepower turbo, right? Can you dyno a junkyard Dodge V10? I've only ever seen one of those in the dyno. Hello, doggies. 95% still yes on running the V12. If they will let me run it, I will definitely do it. Just because it's so cool. It's coolio like Brulio. More airflow in the LT. What's an LT head flow compared to a LS3 head? I know you do some fabrication. Are you capable of custom grinding a cam? I'm not capable of that. I don't have any cam grinding equipment and wouldn't know where to start on that anyway. I do know a guy though. That's well beyond my fabrication skills. We did 1200 horsepower with a 200-inch Rambler. That was with a lot of boost though, right? That would have to be with 60 pounds of boost or something. That would be a lot. What would be the difference between an LS7 cam and a BTR hot rod or red hot cam? The BTR, the hot rod would make a lot more than LS7 cam. A red hot cam would make a little bit more than that. And it depends on what combination you're putting on. An LS7 cam is not a very powerful cam. Any chance of a max effort cam comparison? You mean like max effort with available piston to valve clearance? I originally was going to do that long ago, years ago, on a 5.3. I wanted people to send me the camshafts that they had that would fit stock piston to valve clearance, and so we could see how much power it could make. The intake and heads would have something to say about that. So you need to decide: do we put that camshaft in a 5.3 with a 862 head and a truck manifold? Because then they're not maximum effort camshafts, because all the other stuff is going to hold the camshaft back. Do we test it on something like I have, where we have really good cylinder heads and a very high RPM manifold, and then the camshafts are going to be specifically tailored or more geared toward that application? When's the next upload? Yeah, I haven't run the M90 on the truck again, so that's a ways off. Cheap L7s around here, but better to go BTR. The BTR will make a lot more power than an L7 camshaft. Almost any aftermarket camshaft, even a small 224 cam, will make more than an LS7 does. 60-pound sequential turbos, alcohol. Yeah, I was going to say it'd have to be a lot because a 200 motor didn't make very much NA power. Looking for 550 in my LQ4. 550 is doable with a 6-liter. It just takes a good cam and ported heads and stuff. I'm excited about the M90 on the truck. Super curious. Is the truck running good now? I assume you're driving it. I'm driving it. It works fine. There is still an issue with this truck, and I'm not sure what it is. I think it's. I'm gonna have to go and check all the grounds, because it's pulling timing all the time. So I'm thinking that it has. I don't think it has bad O2 sensors. I mean, NOx sensors. It could, but usually that's a grounding issue. And I know that sometimes when I go out, the thing doesn't want to start, and then I just move the battery cables around, and then it starts. So I think I'm pretty sure it has bad grounds, and so what I need to do is go through and scuff up and improve all the grounds. Richard, I have a 5.3 Vortec SI trim with water to air cooler. What do you recommend is the best water or coolant we run water, but it'd be good for you to have something in there to stop electrolysis. A coolant in there is not going to make it transfer heat any better. It's not going to make the cooler more efficient, really. All it's going to do is stop stuff from building up. Mechanic Hicks right here. It's time for his own stuff. I know. I just drive the truck. But at some point, it's going to stop me. I mean, it has a check engine light on right now, so I need to fix it. Going to port 317s, not decided on a cam. If you're going to make 550 horsepower out of a 6-liter with ported 317s, and if it's an LQ4, it's even lower compression. So you're going to have your hands full. It's going to be a big camshaft to make that kind of power. There's also a cheap LS7 intake. An LS7 intake won't work on that. You can't run an LS7 anything on that motor. You can't run rockers. You can't run a cam. You can't run, well, you could run a cam, but because yours is a Gen 3 motor, I'm thinking, that camshaft doesn't have a provision for a rear mounted cam sensor. So you have to have a front mounted, a different front cover, a different sensor, a different timing gear set to make that work. So that camshaft would be a fairly involved swap. Would running water meth through my Whipple rotors cause damage over time? I'm told that it does, but I haven't seen that. We use water wetter. I like water wetter. I've used it a lot. I had nothing but good experiences with the guys from Redline. The LT1 is 336. Well, every time I've measured them, the 315 on the LS3. But yeah, that's a little bit better. The 6-cylinder 300 is not going to be able to take advantage of either one of those cylinder heads. It's probably not going to be able to take advantage of the 250 that you would put on a 799 or a 243 head. Been asking around on forums, what do you feel about the timing belt on smaller Chevy versus chain? I don't run timing belts on street motors. Yeah, milling your 317 heads would help Bob with make more power. The only reason people put belt drives on there is so that you can adjust the cam easily. In some race applications they run them, but I wouldn't do it on a street car. All right, Turbo Sentra, got our fingers crossed for you. Do you think the newer 4-cylinder LS is going to be a good platform? I didn't realize that they were making a 4-cylinder LS. I'm in BC. There's some cheap LS7 parts. I would mill them for sure. I'm curious about angle grinding them. Yeah, you can angle mill them, but again, on your motor, you can't run LS7 parts. A 706 head would be a huge step up from a factory 300 Ford head. I mean, you can buy a cam fairly cheap. I have a cam you can buy for $150. I don't know if you're going to find something cheaper than that. $1.50. Looking at a WS6 with a 6.2 swap, do you think a 6.2 would make more power than a 6.0? Yes, it will. Not big bang power levels, because you're not going to go to 1500 horsepower on these builds, I don't think. Is a 6.2, it would have to be an aluminum block, and I wouldn't take an aluminum block as far as I would take a 6-liter iron block. Small block Chevy versus LS, same displacement, same head flow, same compression, same cam. The cam's not going to be the same because the firing order is going to be different. And for head flow, are you talking about the same peak head flow? Because you're not going to be able to get them to make the same head flow at every valve lift. They don't have anywhere near the same intake manifolds. So that's the problem with doing that. Bob, are you still wanting to make 550 horsepower? Have you ever run dyno tests on a small block Chevy with good heads, big cam, and 3 deuce manifold? Not at 8,000. And the difference between 7,000 and 8,000 is really dramatic. And a 3 deuce manifold would be terrible at 8,000 because it's going to be a dual plane-ish kind of manifold, and it's not going to be good. I have run a tri-power setup on a small block, but it's not what I would pick to run lots of engine speed and power. Motor Trend claims 3.6 liter and 340 horsepower. Ben, that's not a real thing. That's not a real motor. That's a motor that Blueprint mocked up and put together and put signs on it to say that it did something. It doesn't actually exist. It's an agricultural motor that they happen to bolt on an LS head because it bolted on, but it's never been run. It's never been finished. It doesn't work. So you don't think the 6.2 would make 1,500 horsepower? I don't think that the aluminum block is strong enough for that. The only one that people are actually racing, the only aluminum block people are using that actually are taking it to that power level, is the 5.3 aluminum block, not the LS1, not the LS2, and not the LS3. My goal is to make 1,000 to 1,100 boosted crank horsepower. So you don't have to make even if you made 500 horsepower and 1,000 horsepower is easy. Crank, no start, time for the computer. Uh-oh. Yeah, just make sure you got Sparky, and make sure you got fuel. Dylan, a single bolt LS3 represents the same problem as an LS7 does. It has no rear mount it has no provision for a rear cam sensor, which his Gen 3 block has. So the cam sensor's in the back. That camshaft doesn't have that on there, I don't think. GM is selling 6.6 liter crate motors. Brian Tooley just ran a bunch of L8T testing on his dyno. Have you run Recport heads on an iron block 6-liter built with twin turbos? No, not specifically twin turbos. I've run boost on Recport heads on a 6-liter though. It works fine. It doesn't care about twin turbos or single turbo. The Recport heads fit on a 6-liter because the bore size is big enough. Redline water wetter works, but you still need water additive for corrosion. We've had some L8Ts sitting around at K-Tech. Andy, do you work there? Do you work at K-Tech? I thought that water wetter also had anti-corrosion additives in it too. Andy, do they still offer? I ran a set of their 706/862 CNC heads that were kind of an inexpensive deal that used the stock valves and everything. The guys from Strictly Performance had K-Tech do those. Do they still offer that? Do they still offer? The porting was like $400 or $500 or something, if I remember right. The K-Tech guys have done some cool stuff. The C5R and C6R stuff. I think that they were involved in both of those. Should I run the V12 LS on the engine dyno with the BTR Red Hot cams? They do Recport CNC every day. Losing power while cranking. So is one of the power feeds not hooked up correctly? Uh-oh. I'm getting chirped on. Yeah, Bob, if it's something that you're going to turbocharge, I usually recommend milder cams for that anyway. You'd be better off just if you're trying to make 1,000 horsepower, a 500 horsepower 6-liter is a pretty mild cam thing if you have a ported head. And then that way the turbo will be responsive and it'll probably be a lot more fun. Haven't seen them do cathedral port heads. These are definitely from K-Tech, and they're definitely cathedral port because they're 862s, and they're just a stock one, a stock valves. I keep having recurring dreams of sticking my Hemi and an FC RX-7 for a track build. Sweet. Small block Ford, 430. How much ring gap to run up to a 200 shot? 6 thousandths or 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore. They do a lot of CNC Gen 5 6.2s. Yeah, I mean, they're doing more LT stuff now, so. Exhaust part needs a lot of help on the Gen 5. Yeah, I remember seeing those for the first time. I'm like, those are really kind of weird. But guys are making a lot of power with them. Direct injected, lots of compression, camshaft, valve reliefs. It's lots of power. When would you say you need an oil cooler for a street strip car? Usually you don't need that. Road race cars are more apt to need oil cooling because they're on the throttle a lot more. I mean, on a drag race car, you're not on the gas very long, so you're not putting a lot of oil heat in it. You'd probably put more in it on bumper to bumper traffic than you would on a strip car. So unless it came from the factory, I hardly like. I take that back. I did put an oil cooler on my Mustang, but not because I was driving it on the street or because I was drag racing it. I did it because we were running the Silver State and we were running wide open throttle for 45 minutes or whatever. And so the oil would get warm. So we put an oil cooler on it. What power level scares you in a 3,000 pound car? I don't get scared because I know how to use it, but I've never driven anything in a 3,000 pound car that has like 1,000 horsepower, 1,500 horsepower that I can remember. 6.4 liter truck, big bang. I'm going to be going back to Brian Tooley's and doing some testing with them on a 6.4 Hemis. So we'll be doing different cams and stuff. So it'll be cool. Yep, Prestige. That's right. V12 LS. I'm scared at the 600 horsepower level of turbo 400. Well, I mean, it depends on how you're employing it. You don't have to have all of the horsepower. You know, the gas pedal doesn't have to go all the way to the floor. How's the next level in a 1600 horsepower LS that didn't go big bang? Well, first of all, it's only 1540 horsepower. 1600 would be a whole nother thing. And I haven't done anything with that in a long time. .4 Hemi test. Yeah, it would be good. We're gonna do a bunch of cams, and I've got some heads and different intake manifolds and all kinds of stuff. CHP mod motor, Crown Vics had oil coolers. Yeah, my truck has an oil cooler on it, and lots of the big block Chevys and stuff, the towing applications, they have oil coolers on them. But for a typical street car, I don't think that that's really a concern. I haven't done a 1UZ or a 2UZ or any of those yet. Admiral, I don't know. I don't know what level it would be to scary. It was kind of scary riding in Jimmy's car that had 750 at the tire in his NSX, only because somebody else is driving, and it doesn't matter who it is. I don't care if, you know, if Lewis Hamilton is driving. It doesn't matter. Just somebody else driving makes it different than when you're driving. And doing having that kind of power, you don't really have the ability to use that on the street. You can't. If you have 1,000 horsepower, you can't put that down. You can't. There's nowhere you're going to launch on the street where you're going to be able to go unless you have all-wheel drive and you have slicks and stuff. You can't use all that. And then where do you have enough room that you can run that thing out? I mean, you know, a thing that has 1,000 horsepower, you're talking about going 150 or something like that pretty quickly. And so I don't know where you have room to do that. Commercials came up for pedal commander on aluminum block, LS block, or are the head bolt threads a steel insert from the factory? You know, I don't remember. We can look and see. I don't think they are. Does anybody know? Reckless. If I was doing a modular Ford, I would pick a PI motor and then I would add boost to it. Turbo Sentra, it's alive. You figured out what the deal was? Typical horsepower per PSI. I don't do it that way. I mean, you could calculate that, but the horsepower that you make per pound of boost is a function of the NA power. So if you know the NA power and then you just divide by, and you take the NA power and then divide by 14.7, that will give you a rough idea of how much power you're making per pound of boost. Richard has not been to West Texas. Richard has been to West Texas, actually, many times. I think I'm mounting an external wastegate upstream of my cat on turbo BMW to bypass cat under boost. An external wastegate upstream of the cat. Is your cat mounted before your turbo? Have you run a Holley HP with a 4150 900 CFM TBI setup? I have not. I've not run a TBI with the Holley HP that I can remember. Oh, bad vacuum leak. Okay. But you got that fixed? Vacuum signal is important. Yeah, Reckless, you can put PI heads and a PI cam and intake on your non-PI short block. It works good. I've done runs where I run 150 miles an hour for 5 or 10 minutes between this city and the next, and there's no highway patrols or anything out there. Where you're running this alleged 150 miles an hour for 10 minutes. Cat's after the turbo, but thinking of using it like a cutout. So are you thinking that your cat is causing back pressure issues? Have you measured that? Recently found out for myself a Gen 3 LS ECU never does waste spark, even with the cam sensor disconnected. The 4.6, the best thing to do is put a cam in it and put boost on it. It's a lot easier to make power with the turbo. We ran blowers on a lot of that stuff and it works well, but it takes to get to 400 with a 4.6 liter 2 valve is like trying to get to 500 with a 5.3. It takes ported heads, a cam, and intake manifold to get up near 400. It takes a lot, but doesn't take, just a cam gets you a fairly good bit of the way. You could do your own porting on the head to help you, make some power. And then you could just add boost. It's a lot easier. Boosted goodness. And we're plugging in. Reckless, that's all good, man. Back to work. That's right. We've been here a long time already. My light already went out. It already decided it was time to go. And so we're going to close out our poll at 95%. Should be 100. So shame on you for the people that for the 5%. And on that note, it is time to go. See you guys all later.